Over the past 2.5 decades, Dr. Robert O. Young has been widely recognized as one of the top research scientists in the world. Throughout his career, his research has been focused at the cellular level. Having a specialty in cellular nutrition, Dr. Young has devoted his life to researching the true causes of disease, subsequently developing the new biology to help people balance their life. Dr. Young has devoted his career to the discovery of the missing pieces necessary to complete the larger picture of health. Here's your host, Gail of Gaia, with her guest, Dr. Robert O. Young.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range. We have Dr. Robert O. Young on again, explaining his hypothesis, and he has phenomenal success rates with just about any disease. But anyway, we'll talk about it more, and I would ask you to please like and share these videos because we are heavily shadow banned, and it would help if you would do that. So thank you very much. And Dr. Young, please begin to explain. And I guess I should ask you an important question. What's more powerful than a gun?
Well, if you look up in the left-hand side of the picture, you see a picture of a younger me. That's Dr. Young, and someone told me that I have the appropriate last name is Young.
It is. I thought of that before.
Yeah, so I'm living my 69th year. Somebody says, well, that's kind of weird. Why would you say that? I said, it's just the way my mind thinks, and I'll get to answer your question here in a minute. But, I start from the point of conception, because, I believe that once the egg is fertilized, that life begins. And what is created? Well, one drop of blood. So once the egg is fertilized by sperm, a blood cell is created, and from blood, all other body cells are created. So the quality of your blood determines the quality of every cell in the human body because bone, muscle, heart, brain, every cell in the human body is a differentiation, is a product of your blood. So it is blood then that becomes your bone. It's blood that becomes your brain. It's blood that becomes your heart. Your blood is made by specific ingredients, and the animals in the wild understand this perfectly. With the way that they eat, particularly the strongest animals in the world, focus on a high chlorophyll diet, foods which are green. I mean, you look at the silverback gorilla, you look at the rhinoceros, you look at the elephant. What are they eating? And what are they eating high quantities? When I was in Trinidad, speaking to a crowd of doctors and citizens of Trinidad, where it has one of the highest incidences of diabetes in the world, is in Trinidad, over 50%. So it's 1 out of 2 are diabetic. So the doctors are there taking their insulin while they're prescribing insulin for their patients. And one of the doctors stood up during the question and answer part and said, hey, Doc Man, we can't be eating the bush all the day, because I'm talking about green foods, and so they switched my name from Dr. Young to Dr. Green, because I was the first one in the world, I believe, in the 80s that came out with a concentrated green powder. It's called Super Greens. That's been sold in every country in the world, around the world, and is still sold today.
Yeah, I got some.
And this super greens was a combination of grasses, of wheatgrass, barley grass, kamut grass, straw grass, oat grass, dog grass, all of these grasses and green foods like avocado and broccoli and spinach and cucumber and celery, both fruit, alkalizing vegetables with no enzymes, no probiotics, but a basic, and this has been a cornerstone of making a difference in people's lives, regardless of the symptomology. And I'm going to share the staging on this. And so you ask the questions, what is more powerful than a gun? And what is more powerful than a gun is a microscope. Because looking under a microscope, there is no mystery at all. Because there you will see the corona effect as membranes deteriorate due to chemical and radiation poisoning, rather than some phantom fake virus that's attacking this. There's no attack. It's all environmental control. So when I think of myself, someone would ask then, well, what kind of doctor are you? I would refer to myself as an internal environmentalist. Greenpeace from within. I'm concerned about air pollution, not only within, but also without. And the manifestations of that pollution, cyanide poisoning and dioxide poisoning that's coming from fracking, that's coming, carbon monoxide that's coming from cars and animals that are polluting our air in all of our major cities. And we're blaming this on a fake virus to initiate a mandated, to eventually get to a mandated inoculation with an unproven cause. We know the effect. The effect is called the corona effect. And so under a microscope, you see the deterioration of the membrane of the red blood cells, of the white blood cells. This is due to their environment. So once you understand that the microscope, both the electron microscope anatomically, and then you add your background of biochemistry into this, and you start testing the fluids of the body, and not just the intravascular fluids, and I'm going to share this with you, but also the other 80% of the fluids, which are the interstitial fluids that nobody's testing. And why aren't they testing? Because if you start testing 100% of the fluids, then you're going to find the truth. And the truth is that germs do not cause disease, period. That's the truth. And so all of a sudden, you then realize that over the last 100+ years, that we've been going down the Alice in Wonderland path, which went to the left rather than to the right. We went down the wrong hole. And that hole was the germ theory hole, and it's caused the suffering and pain and death of billions of people.
You know, one of the things that came up about that is for every bug that they found, there's a drug that they use that further poisons the body.
Well, you know, you're attacking a symptom. Mm-hmm. Germs are of themselves are nothing more than biological transformation of animal, human, or plant matter. They're symptoms of cellular breakdown, of you know, the matter which is not living, but is made up of living anatomical elements that are living. If someone is cremated, you cannot destroy all the matter, because there's matter within our physicality, living, indestructible beings, anatomical, intelligent beings that make up the genetic. If the genetics was living, then it would be left after destruction. But it's not. What's left is what Antoine Béchamp discovered at the end of the 19th century, was what he referred to as the Microzyma, which means small being. And this small being cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. Our Creator, God Himself, called it dust. He said in His own words, "From dust you are, and from dust you will return." This dust is indestructible, intelligent matter that contains the transcripts of every thought, every word, every deed that you've ever done, and those of your progenitors. And that this is why, when we experience things in the present, that sometimes our past is manifest because our past is transcribed on every anatomical element that has then become part of us. That's why it's very, very important to choose those who you decide to copulate with, those who you exchange fluids with, because this is how you become one. You become one by the exchange of these anatomical elements, and literally on an anatomical level, share these anatomical, whether it's an egg and a sperm that becomes one. That union is living, intelligent matter that cannot be destroyed, cannot be created nor destroyed, but then becomes a new being. And that new being is the composite of you and your significant other, your spouse, and the progenitors that have gone before them. So this is why, people say when they've been married for a while, you're starting to act like your mother. You're starting to act like your father, Or you'll be going somewhere and you'll go, deja vu sets in, and all of a sudden you start experiencing, I've been here before. And the answer is yes, you have been there before. Deja vu is just the remembrance of those living intelligent beings that make up genetic matter, that makes up the cell membrane where the intelligence is. Even without mitochondria, cells function perfectly. These are not the factories of cells. The factory of cells is much smaller than that. It's the living, indestructible dust. It's the microzyma. It's what my teachers, Dr. Marie Blecker at the Enderlin Institute and Dr. Gunther Enderlin, referred to as the proteid. And Dr. Livingston Wheeler, an American doctor and researcher in cancer, called it the progenitor cryptoside. And Gaston Naissons from Canada, the biologist, called it the somatid. We are talking about the same thing. From dust you are, and from dust you will return. And if you understand that you are not your genetics, you are that which is created, that you are that which is that creates that genetics, which is the blueprint of a man and a woman who then share their anatomical elements together, that then become a transcript of many generations, both present and past. And this is then manifested in the physicality that then when we put a colloidal system together, colloid meaning two dissimilar ingredients, that when we infuse into the physicality a created soul, a spirit, we create a life. And that happens at the point of conception. At the point of conception, a blood drop is created, a new colloidal system is created, combining of spirit and physicality, both earthly and that which is not earthly, to join together into one to form a whole new being. Okay.
Boy, I wish I would have known this when I was younger.
which when we were born. And science shows that women who have multiple partners contain the genetic matter of all their partners.
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because you're sharing anatomical elements. God in his wisdom was not commanding us, but advising us that we should choose that one and be faithful to that one because of the consequences of taking on other intelligence. Even the eating of meat, it has consequences when you're taking on the genetic matter and the interstitial fluids or the blood, intravascular or interstitial fluids of animals which contain these living indestructible beings, and their experience can then become part of you. So you could say, well, maybe that supports, the so-called infectious disease. And I want to say to that, I accept the reality and have noted this in all my research, using electron, using phase, using bright field, using dark field microscopy. This is my gun. I have the evidence for those who have eyes who want to see and ears who want to hear. But most people are educated beyond their intelligence, or they don't have the capacity because of mind control, and they've been programmed to where nothing can change their mind because they are under mind control. And this mind control, where we actually lose ourselves, can happen by taking on the anatomical elements of other animals or other humans that changes our physicality. It contributes to our physicality. Doesn't cause any specific disease, but creates biological pollution. This is what's in vaccines. Biological pollution, chemical pollution. This pollution is not the solution to the dilution. And the dilution, when you're dissolving things and putting them into your solution, which are the intravascular, the interstitial, the intracellular, the fluids of the body, this is then affects the environment. And so the premise of all this, and what I want people to consider, if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, that you're ready, I understand that. I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make the horse drink. I cannot cure anything. Cures come from within. Cures come by personal belief, and from that belief, that exercise of faith, which stands for the first attribute in thinking healthy. Most people are taking fear. Fear is what's motivating people, and lack of knowledge, ignorance, is what's causing people to consider poisoning themselves in order to heal themselves. You cannot treat disease with disease. This is unscientific, but it's out of fear, which stands for false evidence appearing real, that has a form of godliness, but it denies the power thereof, that has the philosophies of men mingled with some truth, but it is a lie. It is a lie. You cannot heal yourself by poisoning yourself. Where did we start believing this? All you prove is that you can poison yourself, and by the grace of God, survive it. Live through it. You see, pH from the chemist means potential of hydrogen. The concentration of hydrogen or protons in a solution either indicates, if we're talking about acidity or alkalinity, and the concentration of hydrogen or protons indicates a solution of pollution. And a solution of alkalinity and the cure, which comes from within, based on your exercise of faith, which is the first attribute in thinking healthy, practicing principles that are based upon health from studying healthy people, which I've done. I come from the world of sport. I come from the world of amateur and professional sport. I know what it's like to be performing at the highest level of my sport. Tom Brady is an example of that. At the age of now going on 43. He is performing at a higher level than he was when he was in his 20s. Why? Because he practices the principles that I'm teaching. The solution to the pollution. You have to change what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're thinking, what you're breathing, what you're feeling, what you're believing, your lifestyle. Lifestyle is what determines the expression of these anatomical elements that make up your genetics. Genetics do not and never have determined your destiny. So once you understand that the human body in its perfect, in its pH now, not potential of hydrogen, but in its pH perfect health, that you are alkaline by design, that this is how you achieve immunity, not by poisoning the body, not by creating antibodies, which is the evidence of the poisoning, but you support your alkaline design by managing the fluids of the body, which we are predominantly consist of. And it's not just the intravascular fluids, which represents only 10% of the entire body fluids. You cannot base your diagnosis by reading blood counts, by reading chemistry of the blood. You're only getting 10% of the picture. You have to study all this, and this is what I published with Dr. Galina McGalko. Together, we published in 2015, even though our research started many years prior to that, but we published in 2015 the quantitative information on the biochemistry of the intravascular, interstitial, and intracellular fluids, so people would know that when you're in hypercalcemia in the interstitial fluids, and you're losing bone mass, and you're being diagnosed with osteopenia and osteoporosis or arthritis, and your doctor is scratching his or her head saying, oh, all your calcium levels are normal in the intravascular fluids, while you're in decompensated acidosis in the interstitial fluids and in hypercalcemia and losing bone mass from your bones that make up your spinal column, that make up your hips, that make up your long bones of your legs. And you're the melting, deteriorating, just like the coral reefs of the ocean, deteriorating the bones, the coral calcium, due to internal environmental acid rain is pouring over your cells. And you have no knowledge of this because your doctors have not been trained in this. They have no knowledge either. So it's the blind leading the blind. And now what we have is we have medicine by symptomology. And this is what's happening today. COVID is not a virus. COVID is being treated based upon symptomology. The actual cause and effect relationship is unknown because there has never been a scientifically identified, isolated, and cultivated virus. It's invisible. And the reason it's invisible, because folks, listen to me carefully. Read my lips. It doesn't exist. Want to hear it again? It doesn't exist. That's why it's invisible. What exists are polluted environments and contributing factors that exist. Different points. One of the major contributing factors is air pollution. 10 million people will die worldwide. Close to 1 million people a month. And yet we're not talking about, dioxide poisoning. We're not talking about radiation poisoning. In fact, those are banned, by the tech gods to be untouchable. because they're protected by those who control the tech companies, those who control big pharma, those who control the universities around the world. And I know this on a personal basis. I've been arrested 3 times. 3 times. I've
No,
been
they
to
don't.
jail. For what?
Because they're
Curing
healing people.
cancer.
Yeah.
Successfully treating type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Reversals in the 90 percentiles. Doing negative control studies. You know, this is science using Koch's postulates. You know, when you do that, and this is why when I did have resources, I offered a $5 million reward for anyone who can prove the existence using Koch's postulates to identify, isolate, and culture, using a petri dish, culture, and then using that culture to infect another species, animal, human, whatever, and create the same symptoms that were found where the sample was derived, that was identified, isolated, and cultured. It's never been done with any virus. Why? Listen to me carefully. Viruses do not exist. Would I be banned for this? Absolutely. Why? Because it's not the narrative that you hear from the true virus. And what is the true virus? The mainstream media. And what is the disease? Ignorance. Hosea said, "For my people perish because of lack of knowledge." We die. We have what is happening today, a modern day wandering in the wilderness. And for those who were taken out of Egypt, every soul but 2, I believe. We have an accounting that Moses wandered off and was never seen again. But his brother.
He may have been picked up by a ship.
The bottom line is we have a modern day wandering in the wilderness, and all will die. And this is not to produce some false evidence appearing real. The only thing that will save us from our ignorance, which is the disease, is the treatment. And the treatment, are you ready for this? Common sense. That's the treatment, folks. None of this makes sense because it's not real. Listen to the people that are talking about this, who are the so-called authorities about this, and look at their expressions of their face. Look at how they look down. Look at how they answer the questions. Look at how they stutter. Stutter. And then ask yourself this. Does this make sense? Does this feel right? And trust your anatomical elements. Trust the spirit which resides within your physicality, that has created a soul, which is 2 dissimilar ingredients that have joined together to form one. A spirit being with a physical being to have a unique experience of physicality. It is your sovereign right. It is your body. It is your life. It is your choice. Anyone that takes that away is practicing filthy lucre, is practicing Luciferian, and is under the influence, is practicing mind control. The human body in its perfect health is alkaline by design. And when we understand the second part of the hypothesis, that all functions of the human body are acidifying, are causing damage and breakdown of the cell membranes, and then leading to mutations of the genetics, which is not mutation of the genetics, it's the anatomical elements that will then respond to the change of environment and become something else. That's why Antoine Béchamp debated with Louis Pasteur. It's not about the germ, folks. It's about the terrain. You're only as healthy as your environment. the oceans, look at the air in the big cities. Why are so many people dying? The reason why they're dying, in fact, it's not so much, but they're dying from chemical and biological poisoning. What they're eating, what they're drinking, what they're breathing. You see, what they're thinking, even your thoughts, which require electrical energy, produce acidic waste that, if not properly eliminated out of the 4 or 5 channels of elimination, will lead to an expression of these living, indestructible anatomical elements that make up every cell in the human body will adapt and change. Why does food spoil in your refrigerator? Why does blood coagulate inside your blood vessel? The reason all this happens is because of change of the environment. The terrain, as Deschamps and Claude Bernard said, the terrain is everything. The germ is nothing. And on the deathbed of Louis Pasteur, he admitted to his grandson, Antoine Deschamps was right, that the terrain is everything, the germ is nothing. Germs do not cause disease. Germs are symptoms of anatomical fragments, elements, biological and chemical, that are called mycotoxins and exotoxins and endotoxins. Endotoxins are genetic matter or fragments of cells that, yes, you can do PCR testing on, but as the late Gary Mullis said, you can't base a positive on an antibody test because it's not specific to that specific cell or what caused that cellular breakdown. These are not from the outside world. This is from the inside world. So this is what I said in the 80s, and I wrote a book on it. It's called One Sickness, One Disease, and One Treatment, because that's the basis of the second part of my hypothesis, or third part of my hypothesis. So the first is the human body in its perfect health, pH, perfect health, is alkaline in its design at a pH of 7.365. So by the thousands. Why? Because it's exponential. And it helps us to understand what treatments will work and what treatments won't work. It's what affects the environment that then affects the cell. It's what you're swimming in. So all functions of the human body are acidifying to the major and damaging to the membrane of a non-nucleated cell called the erythrocyte, the red blood cell, which makes up all other body cells. Blood becomes skin, blood becomes bone, blood becomes muscle. The quality of that blood determines the quality of every organ. So skin is rejuvenating itself every 30 days. Blood is being manufactured at 5 million red blood cells per second and rejuvenating itself completely and becoming a whole new organ in 4 months. This is why I established the protocol for focus to help people reverse any condition or symptomology that they've been diagnosed with, whether false, and 90% or more are false positives, because they're based on 10% of the information or anatomical information that doesn't deal with functionality or physiology. I mean, you can't determine the health of an organ anatomically. You can determine it biochemically, you can determine it functionally, and in conjunction with physiologically. So you can have a perfect anatomically looking liver, but then die from liver disease because the liver's not functioning. I can go out in my garage and say, oh, that looks like a good engine, and then I try to start it, and it doesn't start, it doesn't work. All the parts are there, it looks anatomically correct, but physiologically, functionally, it doesn't function. So you have to look at all aspects. When you're testing, you have to look not at just which current medicine does. Oh, well, it's too late, guys or gals. Finding cysts and lesions is after the fact. You could have prevented that if you had tested 100% of the fluids. But you don't have the tools to do that, and you don't have the education to do it because you're not taught in medical school. Because if it was taught, you would find out the fallacies and the falsehoods and the lies that are perpetuated by the germ theory. and the challenges and the censoring and the imprisonment or prosecution or persecution that's perpetuated on those who actually tell the truth.
Oh, boy, is that the truth. And it's really escalating now.
The human body is alkaline by design. All functions of the human body are acidifying. They produce waste products, metabolic waste products that can cause cellular membrane damage and genetic mutations and the change of the cell. It's called pleomorphism. It's the change, bacteria in our food is the result of cellular breakdown from within. You don't say that, wow, this food smells funny, it must be infected, let's inoculate it.
That's about what we do, isn't it?
Oh, wait a minute, my food is spoiling. I don't want to eat this because it is changing because of its environment. And then if it manifests germs, such as mold, you don't go, oh, there is a mold infection of Aspergillosis niger, or some mold on the food. You don't go, oh, this is an infectious. No, this is an outfection. This is coming from the inside out, not from the outside in. So the whole infectious theory is a fairy tale. It's a belief based upon a foundation that is false, and that is germs cause disease. So when you understand that now that there's only one sickness and one disease, and that's the overacidification of the blood and then interstitial fluids that are affecting the intracellular fluids of the cell and affecting the membrane, there's only one disease, one sickness, and that's the overacidification of the blood and then the interstitial fluids due to an inverted way of living, eating, breathing, thinking, feeling, believing, where you live, how you live your life. These are personal choices. Disease is born in us and from us. You don't get cancer, you do cancer. You don't get fat, you do it. In fact, fat is not even a disease. Obesity is not a disease. Diabetes is not a disease. It's actually an expression of overacidity that begins in the interstitial fluids that surround the cell. Not in the pancreas for diabetes, not in the fat tissue, but again begins the genesis of disease, of sickness, begins in the interstitial fluids. But let's not test that, even though we have the technology to test it, because then we will be found out. And then, as Neil Solomon said, Dr. Young's new biology will change the medical and biology worlds as we know them today, that it literally changes everything.
It does. It does. And that's why, too, when you try to present this, you have a lot of cognitive dissonance right out the gate because we've been indoctrinated with this. Are you still there? Are you still there?
Everything.
Okay. I think I lost you. Excuse me, we'll try to get Dr. Young back. And hang on for a minute. Or I will pause the recording and we can edit this back together. I don't know what happened. Of course, his information. There you are. There you are. We lost you for a minute there. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I can't remember where I was, but no, I remember where I was. Let me just go here to screen save. So here we are. So
they don't like what you're saying.
You cannot base your conclusions on genetics without including epigenetics. And epigenetics is the study of the fluids that surround the cells, or the intracellular that surround the genetics. Genetics is subservient in how it expresses itself. Not because you were born this way. No, you decide the destiny of your life. You don't need to be labeled anymore. Your destiny is determined by your environment, not your genetics. We know this in the successful reversal of autism. We know that things can change by focusing not on the cells, not on the genes, but on the fluids outside. It's the study of the environment. That's what epi means. It means outside the genetics. If you're not studying what's happening outside the genetics, would you do this with food in your refrigerator? I mean, let's put on our common sense hat now. If food is spoiling, it's because of an aging process. It's because of even under refrigeration, things still spoil over time because they've been taken out of their normal habitat and they have to adapt. And that adaptation is to return from its beginning. And these are just stages. A blood cell is just a stage of the endobiont, of the proteid, of the somatid, of the progenitor cryptoside, of what Antoine Béchamp referred to as the microzyma. And his beautiful culmination, his experiments, which can all be documented by any scientist in the world, that prove what he was saying over 100 years ago is correct. It's called the third anatomical element, the blood. In his second work that I pulled out from the catacombs of the medical school library at the University of Paris, literally bringing them out from the cobwebs of 100 years and bringing them back to life. Antoine Béchamp, you have been resurrected. Your life did mean something, is meaningful. What you were saying was true. And as I stand on your shoulders, as one of the greatest scientists that has ever walked this planet, not me, but Antoine Béchamp, as I stand on your shoulders and honor you, thank you for speaking the truth.
You're making me misty-eyed.
So the single most important thing that we can take back is our sovereign right. That this is your body, this is my body, that this is your body, this is your life, this is your choice. We cannot let those who would say otherwise dictate and control us with their specious doctrines and their unfounded scientists based upon faith or belief of something that does not exist, or conclusions that haven't been researched completely. This has been my life for over 4 decades.
You've done a phenomenal job.
If you've heard me speak in 1980, if you heard me speak in 1990, if you heard me speak in the 2000s, 2010s, if you saw the work I did even when I was incarcerated, still changing and saving lives, and those who were watching over me and protecting me from harm's way, even the officers there, thanked me. And as books poured into that place of incarceration, and the sheriffs there saying, "Hey, Dr. Young," they called me Doc, you can't be bringing in all these books. You're only allowed 1 book. And I kept bringing the PhMiracle, revised and updated, into the jailhouse because there's people there
That everybody forgot about.
that are suffering
Yes.
and dying under extreme conditions
And they
of
don't
air
care.
pollution, light pollution, food pollution. They're being treated like animals,
Worse. Yeah.
or worse, not as human beings. And I cannot stand by and watch the suffering of another without reaching out and saying, can I help? And so, yes, we were bringing books in and people were reading them all throughout these places. The PhMiracle, saved people's life. One that we actually, I went to those who are over talking to the sheriff, saying, we need to get this man out now. If not, he will die tonight. And he was flown out by helicopter. His life was saved. The next day, they came to me, said, thank you so much. They don't want people dying in prison, and they don't want to have to account for that. When I say they, I'm talking those who are stewards over the prisoners, over those who are incarcerated.
How do we get them to improve what they're doing to people?
Here again, you have to understand the disease. The disease is ignorance. The treatment is common sense. And when we understand the PhMiracle and what I define as a natural phenomenon between the cause and effect relationship, which is not currently understood by the world's population and the top scientists, even he who received the Nobel Prize, Gary Mullis, for his work in his discovery of mapping the genetic matter, and identifying that. To learn later on, and one of those from MIT that came to me and said, wow, your work is Nobel.
Definitely.
Your work is Nobel. And I said, I'm not looking for a prize. I'm looking to save a life. I'm looking to change a life.
Exactly.
So this is what happens to people that speak the truth. And the man that honored me, and many have, and not that I deserve the honors of men, I only seek the honor from my Creator and doing His will. I've been blessed with great knowledge.
Yes, you have.
And, when we understand that the single most important factor in maintaining health, energy, fitness, and vitality is to understand the most important organ of the human body, and that's the blood, a living, flowing organ. From its essence, as Muhammad said, don't you understand, in the form of a question, don't you understand that you were created out of one drop of blood? Don't you understand that when an egg is fertilized, life begins, and we have no right? We have rights before that inception, but not after that inception. And that more people died by abortions in the millions in order to control the surplus population, rather than honoring that life and realizing life is precious, life needs to be protected in and outside the womb. And if you've lost your sense of being, and don't understand that last statement, then you have to really consider, who you worship and who you follow. And who is controlling your true essence, your true physicality, underlining that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We are eternal in nature. And so the single most important factor is to understand this hypothesis. And when we do that, then we can understand the simple metaphor that the fish is only as healthy as the water that it swims in. So if we look at this picture, what would you do? Would you treat the fish, or would you change the water? What would you do? Put on your common sense hat.
Change the
We're
water,
only
but
as
we're doing
healthy
just the opposite.
we're only as healthy as the water that our cells swim in. So what we need today, I believe, if I
agree
may
with you.
be so truthful and so honest, is that we don't need health care or medical care. We need self-care. We need a self-cure, not medical cure. We need education, not medication. We need education, not vaccination. We need health freedom, not government mandates and government control. And I'm not running for any office, and I'm not being paid by any group. I have no loyalty other than to my Creator. I have no alternative motives. Our body is slightly alkaline at 7.365. 7.365, if it drops below 7.3, you start feeling the symptoms of sickness and disease. And at 7.1, you go into a coma, and at 6.9, you're dead.
Wow. How does that interpret into the urine and saliva?
Well, I'll get to that because urine and saliva, urine is a product of the interstitial fluids, and saliva is a product of the stomach, which is supplying the glands of the mouth to secrete sodium bicarbonate, which is produced by the stomach, which is the major organ for alkalinity. In fact, its main purpose is to provide the production of sodium bicarbonate. And of course, there's a byproduct of sodium bicarbonate, and that's hydrochloric acid, which falls into the gastric pix away from life to be eliminated as the poison that it is that provides no good thing.
That's just the opposite they teach us too.
Yeah. So our body produces natural alkaline buffers to buffer the acidity. And we have a system, an anatomical system that begins with the stomach and branches off to other glands, such as the salivary glands. And so when you're testing your saliva, you're testing the body or the stomach's ability to produce an alkaline compound called sodium bicarbonate, NaHCO3, which is made from water, salt, and carbon dioxide. I've always wondered why those in authority would make the suggestion to decrease salt. It's just one of the other propagandas of population control that will reduce the surplus population by taking you off salt, even though those with good hearts and well-meaning based upon their education in the school of philosophies of men at the university, try to save your life by first hooking you up to a 0.09 saline solution of sodium chloride because it's the only thing that will hold the spirit inside the body. It's the glue. Salt is the glue. Salt within the body fluids were salted with sodium to act as a matrix of which electrons can be transported to every cell to energize those cells. When you take salt out of your diet, you take life out of your diet, because the Latin for salt is soul, and soul represents your spirit body, which is glued to your physical body, that is released upon death because of the lack of salt. Salt is at the pinnacle of good health, of vitality, of fitness. It is the element by which sodium bicarbonate is produced. It is the element by which is transported in a compound called sodium chloride. Sodium chloride releases 2 atoms of oxygen, of atomic oxygen, nascent oxygen of O1, as a response to excess acidity that's brought in through the poisons that we infest ourselves from what we breathe, what we eat, and what we drink. Or, unfortunately, if we're inoculated, the body defending itself from what you just did which you poisoned the human body. You provided zero immunity, and all you proved is you poisoned yourself, and from the grace of God, lived through it. There is no immunity that is provided by white blood cells. Immunity is provided by managing and maintaining the delicate pH balance of the internal fluids of the body. It's the environment, folks. And when you're testing urine, you're testing the pH of the interstitial fluids. And if you're dealing with any sickness or disease, that pH is running well below normal. It's below that 7.2. And those who are very sick and chronic disease are at a pH of 5.5, and you're barely holding on to life because you've been taken off salt, you've been put on a high acidic diet. That's called soul food, which is not good for the body. And when I mentioned, those who came to my aid, Professor, Dr., Dean, Lawrence Carter Jr. of the largest African American university in the United States, Morehouse College, and he invited me to be part of his advisory committee, as he invited me to present my work at the School of Medicine and to provide a text for the students there called Sick and Tired, Reclaim Your Inner Terrain, so they can get more light, truth, light, and knowledge to help. The reason why they're becoming doctors is to help their patients. That oath actually means something. The Hippocratic Oath, to do no harm, is something that was embraced early within their life, early within their education, and then having to take the oath to do no harm. Wonder why we're getting so many, of those who are speaking out against the system that is watching people die at the hands of a fake virus, of the hands of treatment and symptoms that do not relate to an infection, but relate to chemical and radiation poisoning, i.e. the dry cough, i.e. the fever, i.e. the fatigue, i.e. the cold hands and cold feet, i.e. upon the death of the patient, clots, pathological blood coagulation, megakaryocytes that produce the platelets and thrombosis and pulmonary embolism and clots in the liver and the pancreas and the brain and the lungs and in the veins and the arteries and throughout the entire body. And they're going to blame this on a fake virus called COVID?
Convid. It's a con.
That's why it's called Convid.
Yes.
And the mandation to take away our sovereign rights, to then inoculate, not for protection.
And now they have the audacity to say wear goggles and wear a mask, and I'm going, oh my God, I don't believe.
Well, if you were in Taipei in Taiwan, which is 25 million people, and you practiced social distancing, most of the population would be in the ocean.
And they have a very low so-called rate.
Yeah, because we don't look at
virus.
cases. Cases is the scientific illusion and not the solution to the pollution. But what it does, it actually presents the true virus, which is the mainstream media, and the true disease, which is ignorance, and shields you from the actual cure, which is common sense. So we have to look at the environment. We have to look at, the treatments, and we have to question those. We have to question social distancing. We have to do our research and realize that wearing a mask is like wearing a chain link fence and trying to keep back these so-called anatomical elements that can pass through an N95. I mean, there is no mask out there other than the spacesuit that they put on to protect yourself from a contributing factor of cyanide poisoning, of nitrogen dioxide, of carbon monoxide. I mean, you know what? This being contained in our homes is like an example of going into the garage and turning the engine on and being suffocated by carbon monoxide poisoning. That's an extreme environment, which unfortunately people are doing because they can't see the future. And stress is a major contributor. If you take 20 people, 19 will die from fear. One will die from the symptoms of an overacidic condition, because fear produces acidic waste that literally bathes the cells in acid and destroys your life. Because when you're thinking, when you're looping, you can induce not a heart attack, but a thought attack. And so fear is a major contributing. Mind control, and it happens, turn on the news, and it induces fear because it produces uncertainty. And people need certainty right now. And from my mouth to God's ears and to your ears, the certainty has been written. The certainty, understand what has happened, come from some of the greatest scientists in the world who are being muzzled, who's writing and publishing. I spoke at the annual conference on bacterial, viral, and infectious disease in Dubai. I was one of the keynote speakers. Dr. Galina and I were both keynote speakers. She spoke, and she spoke about non-invasive medical diagnostics. Alkalizing, our conversation here and our presentation was alkalizing nutritional therapy in the prevention and treatment and reversal of any sickness and disease. We published this in 2015. But you can't get this in the New England Journal of Medicine because it's controlled by the medical mafia.
Yes, that's exactly what they are.
Published because it's not the narrative. It's not the narrative. The narrative is germs cause disease, which is a false doctrine. And when we understand where acids come from, they come from metabolism, they come from foods and drink, from the air we breathe, exercise, one that you already know about, lactic acid. I mean, how does lactic acid feel? What do you feel when you have too much lactic acid in your interstitial fluids? What does it affect? Your connective tissue. What is one of your connective tissues? Your muscles. What is the symptom associated with your muscles and lactic acid?
Very sore.
It's a four-letter word.
You're sore.
Pain. Sore.
Pain. Yeah.
Pain. You cannot have pain without acid or acid without pain. If you have pain, you have acid. If you have acid, you will have pain. Lactic acid listen to this, it's very important. Lactic acid is elevated, not in the blood, even though we see that at end stage. Lactic acid loads are elevated. If you don't test it, it's out of sight and out of mind. You go to your doctor, test the lactic acid loads of the intracellular vascular fluids. Well, why do you want to do that? Because that's the cause of cancer. Cancer is not genetic. Cancer is affected. The genetics are affected by the epigenetics, which are at lactic acid loads. Where are lactic acids coming? From metabolism. If you're over-exercising, you're producing lactic acid. If you're talking, moving, thinking, you're producing lactic acid. You're also producing citric acid. Citric and lactic acid are the two main acids that cause sickness and disease. And where do you find those? If they're not in the blood, they show up in the interstitial fluids first. And for a type 1 diabetic, high glucose levels initially, before the diagnosis, are not in the intravascular fluids, they're elevated in the interstitial fluids. So you can actually prevent this, reverse this, before it's even diagnosed. Are you getting this?
Yes, I am. I'm writing it down.
So when we understand that when our environment's compromised and our lactic acid loads are elevated, we risk cellular breakdown, DNA mutation, cellular fragments. We don't measure it after the fact and say, aha, there is the exosome that's been released to prevent internal bleeding, or has been released as a byproduct of cellular breakdown, or pleomorphism, when we see anthrax being born out of the cell, not as an infection, but as an outfection. When we embrace the terrain theory and realize that the germ theory is false, and this whole idea of infectious disease is a religion based upon a concept that only exists on a piece of paper. And the bacteria and yeast do not cause disease, but are the symptoms of cellular breakdown as anatomical elements that used to be healthy and strong and vibrant become something else, just like the food in our refrigerator. Our bodies are spoiling. We don't get old, we mold. And if you go into a rest home or a care center like that, what you smell is bodies that are molding.
God. Yeah, it is an awful smell.
It is an awful smell. And we're trying to control that by giving them toxic, acidic, hydrochloric acid, contaminated medical drugs that are not produced to sustain life, but to end life.
Wow.
Because of the surplus population. And so then when we look at the statistics of COVID, which stands for CONVID, a certificate of vaccination identification, which is the true outcome of all this, to systemically poison 8 billion or more people of the world, to reduce the surplus population, because we do not have the resources or the knowledge to contain this, that the second wave and the third wave are plandemics, planned to take more and more people, to literally mind control people to agree to a vaccine if it's our only hope. And our own hope is not to buy into the germ theory, not to buy into the infectious disease theory, not to buy into inoculation, but a solution of dilution of the pollution to restore the alkaline design of the internal fluids is the solution. It's all environmentalists. The bacteria and yeast are symptoms that what we're breathing can only contribute to states of imbalance, and why some people get sick and why some people don't is determined by their internal environment when exposed to contributing factors of disease. So what is the major organ responsible for producing alkalinity to manage and maintain the alkaline design of the internal fluids of the body? Is it your lungs? Is it your liver? Is it your stomach? Is it your intestines? Is it your skin? And I propose this to any scientist, any medical doctor, any layperson. Do you want to give it a go?
Well, based on what you've taught me so far, I'm thinking the stomach.
That's right. Ding, 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 ding.
Oh, good. I got it right.
You got it. And you hesitated because you wanted to give the right answer for yourself, so you knew you were thinking correctly. And those who are listening to this, right, the stomach is not an organ of digestion. This is a myth. This is a scientific illusion. that the stomach's main purpose is to alkalize your food, that it secretes a pH of 8.4 upon the food in the form of a compound called sodium bicarbonate, that the solution to the pollution is by drinking alkaline water to neutralize that acids. The very thing is that don't drink with your meals is actually the opposite of what you're supposed to do. It's to drink with your meals and to drink alkalinity and to drink high pH water at a 10 or a 10.5, even 11, to provide more of the electrons of life, because we're electrical beings having a physical experience, that our bodies run on electricity in the form of an electron, that our atoms are electron concentrated, that they're destroyed by hydrogen, by protons, by acids, and that the destruction of the apparatuses within the human cell and the birth of all these other entities, bacterial phages, endotoxins, mycotoxins, exotoxins, DNA, RNA fragments that are being tested by antibody tests. These are all scientific falsehoods. All you're testing is the DNA of what used to be, or the RNA of what used to be an organized animal, plant, or human cell that's now breaking down within the body fluids. And this doesn't give us any more information than we had before, because we have not tested the chemistry of the interstitial fluid, which is where the genesis of all sickness and disease begins, and the genesis of all health, energy, and vitality. That reading this paper, when this paper was presented in 2013 to the trustees of the University of Southern California, because of the work that we had been carrying on, we're one of the top research groups and well-respected scientists there and his team, validating third party everything that I was doing for 2 years to validate the cure for cancer. And then actually presenting that, Dr. Magalko and I presenting the cure for cancer in London of 2019 after being released from incarceration. I didn't say, oh, wow, I'm going to change my ways. Change my ways. What voice do I listen to? Do I listen to men? No, I listen to God. Do I follow his dictates? Do I follow that advice? Do I listen to that still small voice that speaks to me? Or do I follow the philosophies of men that are not based even in the gold standard of science called Koch's postulates? Do I listen to the Germans? Yes, I studied there. I studied on the great scientist, Dr. Marie Blecher at the Enderlin Institute. Yes, without her, I wouldn't be where I am today, where she studied under the great scientist, Dr. Gunther Enderlin, and began learning about the colloidal connective tissue of the shad over 40 years ago, learning about this organ that's not even talked about in modern day medicine, that's not even in the medical textbooks, but the Germans know. Yes, do they know about interstitial fluids? No, but do they know about the largest organ of the human body called the interstitium? Do they know that the stomach is an alkalizing organ? It's part of a complex of glands, from the pancreas to the gallbladder to the lubricant glands, to the salivary glands, all these, to the pylorus glands, all these glands that secrete sodium bicarbonate to alkalize the food, to prepare the food at a pH of 8.4 in a liquid state to be biologically transformed into stem cells in the crypts of the small intestine. It is in the crypts of our root system, in the crevices, not filled with enzymes or not filled with probiotics, but a pristine environment of an alkaline environment at a pH of 8.4, where liquid food can fold into the crypts, be biologically transformed into stem cells that then become the erythroblasts, then become the erythrocyte, that then differentiate into brain cells, muscle cells. So when I'm talking to Tom, or if I'm talking to any professional athlete, you do not build blood, you do not build muscle with the flesh of other animals.
Thank you.
You build it with blood, your blood, and you build that blood with what I call the COWS program: chlorophyll, oil, oxygen, water, and salt. Cows. Yes. Does that mean you increase the level of chlorophyll into your lifestyle and diet? Absolutely. Why? Because it's identical to hemoglobin. We know this. Lance Armstrong didn't know the correct way for blood doping. You actually take chlorophyll to build your hemoglobin, to build the counts of your hemoglobin, to carry more oxygen. You eat chlorophyll to build red blood cell counts so you can take more hemoglobin to the various parts of the build new and repair new. You have downtime. We did this for the University of Miami Dolphins. We tested the defense against the offense on a very simple experiment of what is called flatlining. Flatlining is when the offense is working out and practicing and they're going through a scrimmage, is that within 30 minutes, the defense flatlines. They have no more energy. They're putting everything out. The offense is still on the field, and they have to put in the second team or the third team. So how do you increase stamina? How do you increase sustainable energy? How do you lengthen, for a tennis athlete, professional, who are the top athletes in the world? Tennis athletes are all on this program. Even the NBA basketball team, Oklahoma, they all went plant-based vegan. All of them. They all went this way because they understand that to derive or to achieve sustainable energy in the third and the fourth quarter, in the third or fourth set, in the fifth set at Wimbledon, you need sustainable energy. Because at the first set, you may have won. But if you run out of gas in the third set, or the fourth set, or the fifth set, you could win the first two and lose the next three because you don't have sustainable energy, because you're not on an alkalizing, energizing lifestyle and diet. And you don't understand the importance of circulation to percolation.
So much I was taught was all wrong.
That's why Neil Solomon said everything changes in the medical and biology worlds as we know them today. Dr. Lawrence Carter knew this. He called me because he was suffering, and even states in his own words that I saved his life to be able to stand at the podium at the Morehouse College, Martin Luther King Chapel, the same place where presidents, Mandela, Gandhi has spoken, and to hear from his words, his mouth, saying Dr. Young is the Martin Luther King of the 21st century.
I can understand why he says that.
Okay. His life was saved with his science. He did all the work. He had to follow the path of truth. He didn't go down the rabbit hole. He knew where he wanted to go. He learned and gained the knowledge, because my people perish because of lack of knowledge, from ignorance. That is the disease.
Yes, it definitely is.
Okay? And what's happening now by big tech, by big medicine, by the universities, going back to the university, USC, my work was suppressed. Even when we handed the cure for cancer in 2013, with 2 years of research and evidence, the answer was we can't afford financially as a university to announce the cure for cancer. We have done an actuarial on this. Dr. Young's work will derive a financial benefit of $800 per treatment, and we're currently receiving between $15,000 to $20,000 per treatment. We would lose hundreds of billions of dollars of money that is either coming by grants or by donors, and we cannot sustain it. If we open a hospital, which was the proposal, it would become the PhMiracle Center for cancer, where people could choose chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, or immune therapy, or they could choose an alkalizing approach to hyperperfuse the fluids with alkalinity, to change the environment, to build healthy blood again, and to learn how to do that with correct food, correct diet, correct environment. Using specific treatments, both intravenous, oral, rectal infusions, even through the pores of the skin, to literally change out the environment, focusing on where cancer and the genesis of cancer begins in the interstitial fluids, and not fighting a tumor, which is actually like fighting or picking at a scab that's trying to heal, but literally changing the environment. And through change of environment, change out the cellular breakdown that's happening because of that environment. So once you understand this, this is why Lawrence Carter, this is why, I knew the King family. They were aware of my work. Were they public about it? No. Was the university? Yes, they offered a class for 1 year. It lasted 1 year until they had to pull it or lose their federal or their donor funding. They had to pull the course. We right now have a choice. The population as a whole is wandering in the wilderness of ignorance, and all will perish if we do not wake up to common sense. And when we look at the polluted world, one of my associates at University of California, Berkeley, Dr. Linda Frassetto, she understands the importance of changing the environment, because we simply do not handle acid waste the way we used to. She understands that cystitis is caused by acidosis. She understands the interstitial lung disease, SARS, severe acute lung. She understands that it's the fluids of the body caused by excess acidity from lifestyle. She understands that kidney disease is a deficiency in sodium bicarbonate. They know that, but you can't patent sodium bicarbonate.
Yeah, that's a problem with anything practically if you can't patent
Her
it.
research, my research, showed the sheer volume and acid waste of our body has forced it to take drastic war-style action to preserve its strategic buffering reserves. What are the buffering reserves? The stomach's ability to produce sodium bicarbonate, and the blood, if it cannot, using its own hemoglobin to buffer excess acidity. And that's why we're seeing holes in red blood cells under an electron microscope. We're seeing deficiency. We're seeing the hemoglobin gone. And reason it's vanished is because it's been used up by the fact that the body's trying to maintain its alkaline design to preserve life. That the flu is the body's forced emulsions of pollution out through the pores of the skin, out through the orifices, the nose, the ears, the eyes, the vagina, the penis, the rectum, the anus. I mean, things are coming out of whatever orifice, and we wonder what's going on here. It's a war, and the body's trying to purify itself. After it's indulged in an acidic lifestyle over a period of October, November, December, this is what's seasonal. The season is a season of pollution. And the solution is the body saying, you're not going to take care of me. I'm going to force this out. So our nose starts running. Our fever goes up to produce, a fever to open up circulation and elimination through the pores of the skin. If you put a mask over an exhaust pipe, what happens?
It'll run the engine.
The engine stops.
Yeah.
If you put a mask over a young body, over the face, they die from carbon dioxide poisoning. Oh no, we're going to blame it on this phantom invisible virus called COVID or Convid.
I've seen little kids with these masks on. Hang on, I can't take this right this way.
So,
Sorry.
to preserve its strategic buffering reserves, the stomach is responsible to protect the liver, to protect the kidneys, our major essential detoxifying organs.
Sorry, I'm shutting off my phone.
Hold on just 1 minute here. There we go. So my work has established then one sickness and one disease, the over-acidification of the blood and then interstitial fluids due to an inverted way of living, eating, thinking, breathing, feeling, all of this. That there's actually not multiplicity of diseases, but there's only one disease with symptomologies. A fever is a symptomology of the expulsion of life. Coughing is the expulsion of acidic toxins that have built up due to what's happening in the blood. And I documented this in 1989, taking pictures of the corona effect.
Oh, wow.
So the first stage of acidosis is fatigue. It's enervation. It's loss of energy. I'm tired. That's an indication. Measure your pH of your urine. You'll see that it's down in the below 7s. You'll see it even maybe in the 5s. Second stage is sensitivities. It's irritation. Third stage is the secretion, mucus. The body uses fluids and binds up acidity that creates this mucus. It's a protective. Catarrh is a result of increased acidity. Stage 3, to protect us from the 4th stage, which is inflammation. 5th stage, which is we're running out of alkaline buffers, and now the body is using, oxygen, reactive oxygen, toxic species to neutralize these acids by secreting nascent oxygen or hydroxyl radicals from the lymphocytes to bind up these wastes. This is an immune response? No. It's a janitorial response of trying to clean up the filth that you created on your own. So induration is the solidification of acid creating all stones. Blood stones, brain stones, breast stones. What precedes breast cancer? Breast stones. What precedes liver cancer? Liver stones. What precedes kidney disease? Kidney stones. What precedes, we're talking about induration. Stones, what precedes leukemia? Blood stones. The body's trying to defend itself from the buildup of waste product that's not being properly eliminated through the 4 channels of elimination. Urination, defecation, perspiration, respiration, and for women, menstruation. And so it protects itself by buffering these acids, causing induration. If it can't do that, then we've got cellular membrane breakdown, DNA mutations. We start seeing cell fragments. They're called endotoxins. We see an increase of pleomorphic activity in the birth of bacteria, which is a symptom of cellular breakdown. We compound this poison by using antibiotics, which are anti-life. They're pure acid. This doesn't solve the problem. This just accelerates the death process. The only thing that saves it is to be able to, the grace of God and the body's ability to defend itself against this assault of acids, or that are coming from not only from within, but also now the treatments. So people are dying from the treatments.
Yep.
Which just accelerates. So what we see is the number one cause of death in hospitals is sepsis. What's causing sepsis? The treatments, the underlying pollution, not understanding the solution, which is the dilution of that pollution through alkalizing remedies. So hyperperfusing alkalinity into the interstitial fluids, into the vascular fluids, which then pushes out into the interstitial fluids, which surround every cell of the human body. If you don't do that, then you go into stage 7, which is degeneration. These are not diseases. These are symptoms of an overacidic body. So our body goes into self-preservation. We start retaining water. We start retaining fat to park the excess acidity. So obesity, that is no longer a fat problem. It's the body perfectly trying to save itself from your lifestyle and diet. And it protects that by pushing acids that it cannot eliminate from the compartments of the interstitium through the lymphatic system and out through the pores of the skin or through urination or defecation. It then parks it on your hips, your thighs, your waistline, in your breast or your brain, to park it in the fatty tissues to protect the organs that sustain life. So fat is not the problem. Acid is the problem. And this is what I said many years ago, that people, and I say this, in a humoric sense, is that we have to get off our fat acids and go to health. And this is how you do it. You have to have knowledge to understand the body creates cholesterol as a protection. That high cholesterol means high acidity. And high acidity causes exposure, damage to the endothelium, the protective lining of the arterial walls. It then exposes the basement membrane, which then activates the clotting factors that leads to pathological coagulation, or DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation, that then causes blood clots, that leads to oxygen deprivation, that leads to carbon dioxide poisoning, which is the underlying pathology which Dr. Galina and I published this month on the pathology of SARS, on the pathology of this COVID-19. And I just shared it with you in 30 seconds.
Amazing.
So premature clotting is what we need to be asking. And this is what I did my dissertation on, is pathological blood coagulation. And I published a paper on pathological blood coagulation so that people can understand what's happening at the cellular and molecular level in the body's way of defending itself. And a clot is a solution to the pollution to prevent internal bleeding and death. It's a preservation mode. But ultimately, you end up dying from the very thing that the body was trying to prevent, which was premature clotting. So the body's leaching minerals from the bones to protect itself. The body's leaching magnesium from the muscles. And so the bones and the tissues, the neutralized acidity can lead to stones, can lead to osteopenia, to osteoporosis, to muscle breakdown. The body goes into reverse transformation and starts producing blood out of your own body cells because you've sorely damaged the root system of your body, which is the root system of the small intestine, which are the appendages. It's called intestinal villi. And tumors are just the manifestation of the body trying to save itself. It's not the cancer, it's the encapsulation of cells that are spoiling to protect the healthy cells. It's like if you have one rotten apple in a bushel of apples, that one apple will spoil all the apples.
Yeah.
That's common sense. How does the body protect the spoiling of one cell, not spoiling? It's called the domino effect. So cancer is a systemic problem that affects the weakest parts of the body rather than a localized problem that metastasizes. Our oncologists taught this. No. Why? Because it doesn't fit into the germ theory mentality in the treatment of a specific disease where we're dealing. Cancer is not a disease, is an adjective, not a noun. It's a specific symptomology of cellular breakdown at stage 7 acidosis. I mean, I had to experience this with my own daughter, who in their 3rd trimester, collapsed while her and her husband were at the movies, and she had an epileptic seizure, and they found a mass in her brain that was the size of my fist, and she had a choice. They're recommending surgery. They're recommending taking the baby immediately, having surgery, and immediately starting radiation, chemotherapy and radiation therapy. You know what she chose?
Go alkaline.
She chose the knowledge that she had. She was told she would never have any more children. She was told she would die of her condition. And now we're talking 18 years later. So this is personal for me.
Beautiful couple.
This is personal for me. When I have my princess, my daughter, which I called her princess, literally devastated. And then I told her, I said, sweetheart, you need to make this decision on your own with your husband. You know what I would do. You know our teachings. You knew how you were raised. You have to make a decision. on, this solution to this pollution that's created this cyst and a mass, and is that going to solve? And I can only say this: those who have brain cancer, if they do the surgery, the risk is very, very high of a reoccurrence, and you're never the same after surgery, any surgery. She elected not to have the surgery. She elected not to have the treatments. She did elect to take some anti-seizure medication. She elected to go to term for her pregnancy. Even though she could have given birth naturally, they recommended, because of pressure, she had a C-section. But guess what? She had 3 more children. They're my grandchildren.
Wow. What a story that one is.
So don't tell me what I don't know. Don't get in my face and tell me what I don't know. I know what I know, and I know what you don't know. I have personal experience of 4 decades, over 90% success rate.
Nobody can argue with that.
And the reason for it, not 100%, is because some people come too late. Some people are so injured from their chemical therapies. They're so overwhelmed with the treatment of disease rather than changing the fluids that they can't save their loved ones. And so my people perish because of ignorance, which is the real disease. And they can't exercise their faith and their good judgment because they've been brainwashed by a system that is corrupt.
Very corrupt.
Even this guy who came to me, even Tony Robbins who came to me, even this young man who was in a wheelchair because of medicine, who wanted to live, who had esophageal cancer, who had lung cancer, had stomach cancer, had liver cancer. It was throughout his whole body. Who was saved not by treating cancer, by changing the environment, and lived an additional 20 years after his prognosis and survived all of his diseases and did not die from cancer.
I saw them kill so many people in the VA when I worked there. It made me sick.
A woman who came to me, Ida, who had gone through chemotherapy for the symptoms of lupus. And yes, there is a cure for lupus, because there's only one sickness and one disease, and that's the over-acidification of the blood and then interstitial fluid. And if you're quantifying and testing this, you would know what I know. And in 7 years, from death to life, not because of what I did, but because of what she did by taking this knowledge and empowering herself to reverse her own. She cured her own cancer. And still alive today in 2020. And is not suffering from the symptomologies of lupus. And when this was presented, she's done 2 documentaries, were rejected by the association because it doesn't follow the narrative. And the narrative is lupus is not a disease. Lupus is a symptom of acidity that specifically begins in the interstitial fluids. And that when you go back to the earth and you sprout and you incorporate more green foods into your diet, that it is green that makes you serene, that reverses the symptomologies of Alzheimer's, of dementia, of Parkinson's, of lupus. That these are all symptomologies of severe poisoning of the interstitial fluids. That when you grow green, you become lean. As you go green, you become serene. And these are the case studies from someone who came to me with inflammatory ductal cell carcinoma. It's not a disease, it's not a cancer, it's an inflammatory acidic condition. and reverses her condition from obesity to weight loss, 100 pounds. 100 pounds of acidity being protected by the weight, because people don't understand that weight is layered on as a form of protection against your lifestyle. This is what happens to people. The outbreaks on your skin, it's not a skin problem, it's an interstitial fluid. You're urinating out through your skin. And in 30 days, you see a complexion, you see rashes, you see blemishes, literally altered by the change of the blood. You see white counts normalize. Here you see on the left before in the blood, and the activation of the neutrophils, activating in response to a polluted environment. And then after that, where are the neutrophils? Look at the structures of the cells. You don't see cells that are absent of hemoglobin. You don't see like 15 neutrophils where there should be 1 in every 5,000 red blood cells. What you see is normality. This is not leukemia that's being expressed on the skin. Any blemish on the skin is coming from interstitial fluid. You're urinating through your skin rather than through urination. Test your urine. Ideal urine pH is 7.8 to 8.4. How about Linda with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, with a tumor on her heart the size of this? Can't do surgery. We can do chemical therapy. Look at before. Look at after. She's alive today. The tumor's gone. Why? Because we didn't treat the disease. We educate. Education, not medication. Education, not vaccination. Health, true care, alkaline care, not the current medical care that's coming down through the pipelines. You see the transformation of people. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it on their skin. You can hear it in their voice. You can see it at the cellular level. You just have to have one of the most powerful instruments, a microscope. It's the leading cause of heart disease. Millions of people are dying all over the world, and we're caught up in this illusion, phantom, invisible, fake pandemic. And if we look at the research, the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine, highlighting excessive consumption of acid-producing foods results in metabolic acidosis. When this occurs, the parathyroid hormone stimulates the removal of calcium from the bones and the teeth. That's why teeth are falling out of your head. To buffer or neutralize the excess acidity, after many years, such calcium loss results in depleted bones, bone weakness, and structure. This is in 1995, folks. Where have you been? Where are you now? Forget about the past. When you look at coronary intervention procedures, when you look at cholesterol levels and coronary heart disease, you see people survive at higher levels. The higher the cholesterol, the better. And you're telling that high cholesterol is bad.
Yeah, everything I was taught is just the opposite.
Everything that you thought was true is actually false.
False, I know.
It's all based upon population control. This is what sulfuric acid looks like when you have an animal protein diet. Here we see at the top a white area like a target. They're called codicytes. It's missing hemoglobin. And right in the middle you have a sulfuric acid crystal, a stone. I call them bloodstones. Here's another one, uric acid. Look at the structures of the cells. They're all stacked together. This is the beginning of oxygen deprivation, a pathological blood coagulation because of excess acidity. We're already in stage 5, induration. Here it is again. Anyone who's sick have these stones throughout their entire circulatory system. They're everywhere. And look what happens when we shift our diet, when we change the internal environment. This happened in 12 weeks. And her whole family is being studied at the University of Utah, my alma mater. Even today, the Hell family has been studied since the 50s and for hypercholesterolemia. And she was a patient in 1996. Look at her cholesterol, 441. Within, as I'm tracking this over a period of 3 years, look what happens to her. This is they say is genetic. Genetic? No, it's environmental. When we change the environment within where the cells, they act differently. When we alkalize and hyperperfuse alkalinity and know what foods to eat, what foods to eliminate, we can alter the cholesterol levels. But cholesterol's not bad. Cholesterol's saving your life. And this is the Framingham study. This right here. This is the Framingham study. 80% of people who develop coronary artery disease have the same blood cholesterol values as those who do not develop coronary arterial disease. 35% of coronary heart disease occurs in people with cholesterols below 200. Look at the death. It's accelerating. This is what happens with inoculation. When you poison the body, you increase the death. That's called an incidence. We're looking at cases. The body's responding to its own pollution. What are you doing to create the pollution to test positive on an antibody test? It has nothing to do with an infectious disease. It has everything to do with the internal environment. And when your cholesterol goes up, your risk for death goes down. But that costs the pharmaceutical companies this study that's been going on for what, 30, 40 years?
Yes. And they put out this horrible drug to lower cholesterol.
Yeah. What I'm saying, you don't lower it. What you do is you change the environment. This is the result of this. So we have case after case, 4 decades of research, published research, self-preservation. Body protects itself to maintain and manage and maintain the interstitial fluid, the extracellular fluids, which is 80% interstitial fluid, 20% vascular fluids, which is 100% of the fluids, to manage and maintain that delicate pH at 7.365. Even Atkins said, the cells and fluids in most people's bodies are acidic. This can cause a lot of health problems. Your body, from neutralizing and disposing of poisonous toxins, leaves you with more susceptible to the cell-damaging free radical, or acid. Oxidation is acidation, that leads to other cancers or cancer into other diseases.
Now we have that keto diet as being so popular.
Yeah. So, the PhMiracle is one of 4. And then you have the PhMiracle for diabetes. And then you have the PhMiracle for weight loss. You see the cases. And then you have the PhMiracle for cancer. And all these books, I've written over 70 books, published over 3,000 articles. And when you start reading this, you start realizing, why did I know this? Why is Dr. Young being censored? Why is he being put in jail? For what?
Curing, and you're not even supposed to use that word.
Well, that's because it's copyrighted.
It's unconventional. It's copyrighted?
Yes, it's copyrighted, the word cure, by the medical establishment. There's only one cause of all sickness and disease, and that's the acidification of the cell due to its environment. So one of the things you can change is what you drink. Do you drink bottled water, tap water, filtered, ionized, filtered water from a third party, or reverse osmosis, or a Brita water system? Which one? What's your answer?
Not bottled water, not tap water. I'm going to go with filtered ionized water.
That's correct. You're passing the test. You want filtered, alkalized, electron-rich water that you control, that takes out fluoride, that takes out chloramines, that takes out, antibiotics, whatever's in the water, whatever, okay? At the same time, puts back in all the good stuff, puts back in the electrons, so it ionizes, it alkalizes. you know, and it does it in a way that you can control. You cannot trust bottled water.
No.
Because you don't have the instruments to test on it. So what is the pH of a healthy drinking water? A6, B7, C8, or greater than 9, or all of the above?
Greater than 9.
Greater than 9, absolutely correct. So here are the 4 attributes of a healthy drinking water. It has to be clean, has to be filtered, has to be purified, has to be alkaline with a pH not less than 9.5. It has to carry a saturation of electrons, a negative charge, at least negative 250 millivolts. And it has to be molecularly structured in no more than 5 molecule structures of H2O, because water in a bottle, water from the tap is clustered between 20 to 40 molecules of water. It can't hydrate the cells. So we say, well, I'm drinking 4 liters of water, and yet you're dehydrated. You need to drink a wetter water, a functionally structured water. I tested the Hunsa water, Lourdes, the Trinity water, Destiny water, and our own water that we produce using a multifunctional, ionized, alkalized electron water. I have one that's not electric, one that's electric, that controls the pH, that controls the electron concentration, that has specific filters to take fluoride, to take chloramines, to take antibiotics out of the water, to take birth control out of the water.
Oh my God.
Research has shown these factors. They are high quality pH beneficial minerals. They carry strong negative electric charge because remember, our bodies do not run on what? They don't run on
Protons. Or
protons, and they do
positive.
not run on carbohydrates or fats or proteins.
Oh, okay.
They do not run on glucose. Our cells run on electrons.
Electrons.
Yeah, glucose is a waste product of metabolism.
That wasn't what I was taught either. It's amazing.
Yeah. So we have to understand that ionization, ion is a charged particle, either positive or negative. We want a water that's saturated with negative charges, okay? This is when negative becomes positive. A negative carries that extra electron that can then buffer or neutralize that positive charge ion. Sugar, vinegar, cyanide, all the different poisons, fluoride, that are in the water. Water technology that electrically activates or charges the water, and so it raises the pH or it lowers the pH or alters the electrical properties and creating either a saturation of electrons or a saturation of protons, and alters and creates what I call a functionally structured water. And I've been doing this now. I mean, all of these bottled waters that you see that are alkaline on the market, they came from my research.
Oh
I'm the
God.
father of all this.
Oh
And I'm
my-
not boasting of this. It's just a reality of it.
It's amazing.
They're all based on my work. And when you understand the pH scale is exponential, so a pH of 7.365, any minor change that drops the ideal pH of the interstitial fluids below 7.3 will begin producing the symptoms associated with the 7 stages of acidosis. And so a pH of 7.1, you're in a coma. At 6.9, you're dead. At 7.365, you're thriving. And when we start looking at the pHs of things like Sunny Delight or Snapples or Gatorade or Red Bull, the pHs and then the energies, pulling energy is putting more poison into your fluids. Coca-Cola, 7-Up, Bud Light. Did you know you're better off drinking a beer than Red Bull Energy?
I believe that.
Look at Heineken, 4.28, a positive 144. Decaf coffee. Urine is better. You're better drinking your urine at 7.2 at negative 56, but you need to measure your urine. I don't recommend drinking the urine, okay? But what I'm saying is all of these fluids that are being sold at the market are poisoning and a contributing factor to the cellular breakdown and genetic mutations that are then giving rise to the antibodies that are being measured and then saying, oh, yeah, death by COVID. Oh, that person died in an accident, death by COVID. Because there's some financial connection which has already been omitted by those powers to be, that yes, there is a financial benefit from the hospitals by saying on the death certificate, death by COVID. Even though they died of cancer, even though they died of heart disease, even though they died from pre-existing condition. And when we go back to the numbers, the average age of death in the world is 78. So the target of this first wave has been the elderly. The elderly are being taken out. They're being taken out by the treatments. They're being taken out by pollution, from air pollution to water pollution to food pollution to drug pollution. So you either are making alkaline donations or contributions, or you're making energy withdrawals. You're in control. And the chemistry is quite extreme. It takes 20 parts of alkalinity, of sodium bicarbonate, to neutralize carbonic acid, which is a breakdown product of carbon dioxide, in order to maintain the pH of a balanced 7.365. So you can't over-alkalize. Whoever said that doesn't understand biochemistry. It's impossible to over-alkalize. Impossible.
I've
Hear
heard
me?
that too.
Impossible.
Yes. Thank you. Because I've heard that before.
Okay, well, you don't have to hear it anymore. And their stomach doesn't digest your food, and that's a whole nother discussion. And we could go on and on, but I need to kind of come to just, we can come back to this presentation later because it's way too long. But I want you to understand that salt water and carbon dioxide, which forms sodium bicarbonate, produces a waste product which has no benefit to the human body. It's hydrochloric acid, but it's in all of our medicines. It's in most of all of our nutritional supplements. Okay, it's a waste product, a cellular breakdown. Okay, but the body produces it just like when you want heat, you burn fire, you create heat from the fire, but you create smoke. Hydrochloric acid is the exhaust. It's the smoke of the heat that you're benefiting from. Okay, and hydrochloric acid is the poison that causes acid reflux. Even though there are acids from food, the body has to pour on the food sodium bicarbonate to raise the pH of the food, to prepare it for biological transformation in the crypts of the small intestine into new stem cells to make new blood. The stomach produces sodium bicarbonate. And so the number one buffer to neutralize acid or hydrogen or proton is the bicarbonate system. But then we have hemoglobin. That's why you see a reduction in blood counts, particularly in chronic disease, or phosphates, or plasma proteins. These are ways in which the body manages and maintains the alkaline design of the fluids of the body. And the stomach is the main organ to do that. And where you see the darker color, those are the pits of where the hydrochloric acid goes, never touching the food, because the purpose of the stomach is to raise the pH, not to digest the food. So here are all the different buffers that the body produces within this system: the alkaline buffering system, bicarbonate, hemoglobin, phosphate, plasma proteins, electrolytes of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, even low-density lipoproteins, cofactors, and water. These are the major buffers of the body. And you already saw my daughter. I talked to her. But this is why we do non-invasive testing. We look at the blood. We look at the way it coagulates. We do physiological testing through thermography. We do functional testing without radiation called ultrasound. We do CBC chemistry tests of not just the blood, but the interstitial fluids and the intracellular fluids. So we get 100% of the picture without drawing one drop of blood. It's totally non-invasive. Every hospital, every emergency care facility can have this technology, but it's being presented and it's being rejected because it changes everything. Because now you've got the facts right in front of you. So the process of superalkalizing the blood and the interstitial fluids to bathe the cells in alkalinity through an alkalizing lifestyle and diet defining what I've done for the last 40 years is defining what foods heal and what foods kill. What foods increase alkalinity, what foods decrease alkalinity, which foods are electron donors, which foods are proton donors. Yeah, it's in the books, the whole list. So, alkalizing nutritional supplements based upon neutralizing acids, raising the pH back up to 7.365, and it's the reason hydroxychloroquine works, because it uses quinine to drive the zinc into the cell to raise the pH of the cell from below 7.3 back up to 7.365 and preserve the apparatuses so that they function naturally and healthy, and that's the sustaining energy. So it's zinc, folks. It's zinc. It's chlorophyll. It's other elements, which some are proprietary, which I may disclose in a personal consultation. But what I'm saying to you, the cells are disintegrating because they're swimming in a pool of acid. Just like the oceans are disintegrating because the fish and the marine life are disintegrating in a pool, an ocean of water. That's why our forests in Alaska are disintegrating. Our cities are deteriorating because they're sitting in a pollution. And we talk about I talk about 34 epicenters of the pollution around the world, from Milan, from Wuhan, to New York City, to Montreal, to Mexico City. These are cities of pollution which have no solution for the pollution because they're focusing on some phantom virus that doesn't even exist, that has not been proven scientifically using the gold standard. And they don't know how to alkalize because they've been programmed with a false narrative that disease is a thing, but in reality, disease is an adjective expressing what's happening in the internal environment of the fluids of the body. So understanding that when we're emoting, that's energy in motion, emotion, those produce acids that can make us sick, that we need to reconnect with our spiritual self, that we need to set goals, that we need to understand and learn something on a daily basis, understand the new biology, the new physics, the new chemistry. All of our books have to be rewritten. All of the universities have to be restructured in their medical school, in their biology. All the books have to be rewritten. The chemistry books have to be rewritten. The physics books have to be rewritten. And look at those things that are going to get things moving. Activating the interstitial fluids into the lymphatic system to move waste out through the pores of the skin. If you don't do it, the body will do it. That's why you have night sweats. That's why you have morning sickness. That's why you have itching. This is why you have lightheaded or dizziness. This is why you have poor circulation. These are why you have acute or chronic diseases. These are all expressions of the pollution within the solutions of your body. Vascular solutions, interstitial solutions, and intracellular solutions. Those are the three bodies of water that makes up 60 to up to 70% of your body fluids. You understand that alkalizing baths is called thalasso pools of magnesium. Go to PhMiracleRetreat.com. Look at the thalasso pools and the 8 pools that we have of different concentrations of salts, of magnesium, of sodium, at different temperatures that literally pull waste out of the pores of the skin. It is closed because of this pandemic, of this fake virus.
Oh my God.
Where people cannot go to heal their bodies. Alkalizing infusions, not just through the pores of the skin, not just orally, not just intravascular, but through the hemorrhoidal vein. These are just some of the ways. Nebulization, to get alkalizing compounds, into the body fluids. We'll show these again to you. And I can go into more detail, but we've already been speaking for such a long time. I think
We have. I'm just so fascinated and just soaking this all in. It has been. So I guess we should probably sum it up, and we'll be back, I hope. This is awesome. I love it.
if you want to learn more,
I do.
if you want to read my books, go to
Oh, yeah.
PhMiracleProducts.com.
I've ordered a number of your
this
products.
is where you get my information.
Mhm.
If you want to learn more science and you don't have a lot of money and you just want to learn this knowledge, you want to bathe yourself, go to my blog at drrobertyoung.com/blog. If you want to understand the origin of disease, understand the interstitial fluid, read the research, read the published research.
I have been. Ever since we started this, I've gone to your page and I've ordered some of your products.
And antioxidants means against acids. Okay, oxidants are acids, so it's against acid. Antioxidants are electron donors. They release electrons. They release compounds, chemicals to neutralize acidity. One of the most popular that I published a paper on is right here. Get this book, read it. You can find it at PhMiracleProducts.com.
I think that one was out.
Yeah, it's been out. Yeah, this is one of my books, one of my papers. It's a published document. It's got real research in it.
Will you be having more copies of it made? I think it was.
We will. We're just making a few additions and corrections to make it better. But yes, it will be available through PhMiracleProducts.com. So you can order that. It probably is up now. If it's out, do check back and find that book. In the meantime, get the PhMiracle book. Book was published in 2001. Get the PhMiracle Revised and Updated, published date 2010 by Hachette Publishing. Read my prior books, Sick and Tired, Reclaim Your Inner Terrain. Here again, that book can be found at PhMiracleProducts.com. Empower yourself in knowledge. If you want to survive this pandemic, you need to have the knowledge to survive it. You've got to have it. My people perish because of ignorance. That is the disease. You've got to bring yourself to empower yourself with knowledge, with education, not medication. Education, not vaccination. Not sick care, real health care. And want to thank you for being on the front lines of this information, sharing it. We hope that not just a few thousand people will hear this message, but it'll start hitting the world. Here shortly in September, there's more and more information that's going to be coming out in 15 different languages to get this message out to the world. Any resource that we have to empower people with self-care, not medical care, self-care to a self-cure for all sickness and disease. That is my objective. Improving the quality of life, the quantity of life, through alkalizing and energizing and protecting the fluids of our internal environment. This is Dr. Robert Young. Go to drrobertyoung.com to learn more. PhMiracleProducts.com to get the books.
So, have you sent any of this information to President Trump?
I gave it to Obama.
Well, I was that wouldn't go anywhere.
I was one of the consultants advising on Obamacare, and my portion was cut out.
Figures. That doesn't surprise me. I think another attempt with President Trump may go further. I hope.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying it's not easy. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on the narrative of this, and those who control the media, those who create control what is being taught at the universities, are the same people who brought you. Who put me in incarceration,
exactly,
shackled me, and now the world is shackled and been muzzled with a face mask that provides no health benefits whatsoever. Because how do you protect yourself from something that doesn't exist? So what is it that exists? Mind control. The loss of your sovereign rights. of your own body.
Yes, it's
If
all very
if you want to
disturbing.
take back your life, you've got to empower yourself with this knowledge. And then you have to step up and you need to share it with those who you love and care about.
I will share this
pray
with
that
as
this
many
is the
people as I
I pray
can.
that you realize this outcome and realize how important this information that is life-changing and it's life-saving.
I agree, I can tell. And I can't thank you enough for all that you've done. All of it. It's amazing.
Well, I couldn't do it without my family. I couldn't do it without my life partner, my associate, Dr. Galina Magalko. I couldn't do it without her. She's part of this to educate and to empower people through education.
I would invite her to come on sometime if she was willing.
Yeah.
So people recognize her and, look to her work as well.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. I love it. I'll be in touch with you. Thank you again.
All right.
Keep up the wonderful work.